Sometimes the people who are supposed to protect you become the very ones you need protection from. My name is Eleanor, and I'm 82 years old today. These weathered hands that now struggle to hold a teacup steady once trembled for entirely different reasons. My silver hair, carefully pinned back each morning, has witnessed decades of secrets that nearly destroyed two little girls who trusted too easily. The story I'm about to share happened over 60 years ago, but trauma has a way of keeping memories as fresh as yesterday's wounds. Before I take you back to those dark months in 1962, I need you to understand something crucial. This isn't just my story. It belongs to my sister too, and to every child who has ever been betrayed by someone they were taught to respect without question. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I was born Eleanor Patricia Morrison in 1942 in the small industrial town of Millbrook, Pennsylvania. My sister Rebecca came along 2 years later in 1944, a blonde-haired, blue-eyed little angel who could charm anyone with her infectious giggle. We lived in a modest 2-story house on Maple Street, where the American flag hung proudly from our front porch, and neighborhood children played hopscotch on sidewalks lined with oak trees. Our father, James Morrison, worked as a supervisor at the local steel mill, a position that commanded respect in our blue-collar community. He was a tall, broad-shouldered man with calloused hands and a no-nonsense attitude toward life. Every morning at 5:30 sharp, he'd kiss our mother goodbye, ruffle our hair if we were awake, and march off to the mill with his metal lunch pail tucked under his arm. Our mother, Catherine Morrison, was everything a 1950s housewife was expected to be. She maintained our home with military precision, cooked elaborate Sunday dinners, and somehow managed to keep Rebecca and me looking presentable despite our tendency to come home covered in mud from our adventures in the nearby woods. She had auburn hair that she curled every Friday at Betty's beauty salon and wore floral dresses that she sewed herself on her prized Singer sewing machine. Our family dynamic was built on routine and traditional values. Father worked, mother managed the household, and children were expected to be seen and not heard during adult conversations. We attended First Methodist Church every Sunday without fail, said grace before every meal, and never questioned authority figures. It was a simpler time, people like to say now, but simplicity often masked complicated truths that no one wanted to acknowledge. Uncle Vincent Morrison was my father's younger brother, and to the outside world, he seemed like everything a family could want in a relative. At 28, he was single, charming, and held a prestigious job as a bank manager at Millbrook Savings and Trust. While my father came home each day covered in industrial grime, Uncle Vincent arrived at our house in crisp white shirts and polished shoes, smelling of aftershave and success. He lived in a bachelor apartment above Henderson's Pharmacy on Main Street, a sophisticated arrangement that impressed the adults in our family. Uncle Vincent drove a shiny black Buick, always had crisp dollar bills in his wallet, and brought us presents that our parents couldn't afford. Fancy chocolates from the city, colorful hair ribbons for Rebecca and me, and small toys that seemed magical compared to our usual homemade entertainment. Vincent really has made something of himself, our mother would say admiringly after his visits. Not everyone can rise above their circumstances like he has. Our father, though proud of his brother's success, sometimes seemed uncomfortable with the attention Vincent received. "Hard work comes in different forms," he'd mutter, but never loud enough for anyone to challenge him. The trouble began in the spring of 1962, when I was 20 and Rebecca was 18. Our father had been selected to attend a special training program at the Maine steel plant in Pittsburgh, a tremendous honor that could lead to a significant promotion. The program lasted 6 weeks, and he would need to stay in company housing during that time to focus entirely on his studies. This could change everything for our family, our mother explained to Rebecca and me as we sat at our kitchen table, the afternoon sunlight streaming through her carefully maintained gingham curtains. Your father might become a plant supervisor, which means better pay, better benefits, and a chance for you girls to maybe even attend college someday. The opportunity seemed like a blessing, but it came with a complication. Our mother's sister, Aunt Dorothy, had been struggling with her health after the birth of her fourth child. She lived 3 hours away in Johnstown and desperately needed help managing her household and caring for the new baby. Our mother, with her generous heart and strong sense of family duty, felt obligated to assist. "I can't leave you girls alone for 6 weeks," our mother worried, wringing her hands as she often did when faced with difficult decisions. "You're both responsible, but you're still so young, and this neighborhood, well, things aren't what they used to be." It was true that Millbrook had been changing. The steel industry was facing challenges, and some families had been forced to move away seeking work. A few houses on our street stood empty, and there had been reports of break-ins in nearby neighborhoods. The idea of 2 young women living alone for 6 weeks seemed impractical and potentially dangerous by 1962 standards. Uncle Vincent presented himself as the perfect solution. "Jimmy, don't you worry about a thing," he announced during one of his Sunday visits, clasping our father on the shoulder with confident familiarity. "I'll move into the guest room and keep an eye on the girls. They'll be safe as houses, and Catherine can help Dorothy without any concerns." The arrangement seemed ideal to everyone involved. Uncle Vincent was family, respected in the community, and financially stable. He could continue working at the bank during the day and simply sleep at our house at night. Rebecca and I would have adult supervision without being treated like children, and our parents could focus on their respective responsibilities without worry. "Vincent has always been so good with the girls," our mother observed, watching as he helped Rebecca with her algebra homework while I prepared dinner. "They adore him, and he's so patient with them. This arrangement will work out perfectly." Looking back now, I can see the signs that should have alarmed us, but hindsight is a luxury that victims rarely possess in the moment. Uncle Vincent had always been particularly attentive to Rebecca and me, but we interpreted his interest as normal family affection. He remembered our birthdays when busy relatives forgot, listened to our school problems with genuine attention, and treated us like intelligent human beings rather than bothersome children. What we didn't recognize was the way his eyes lingered, a bit too long when we entered a room, or how he always found reasons to touch our shoulders, hands, or hair during conversations. We didn't question why he insisted on driving us to school events when other parents seemed content to let their teenagers walk or take the bus. We simply felt special, chosen, worthy of an adult's concentrated attention in a world where children's voices often went unheard. The final arrangements were made during the last week of May. Our father would depart for Pittsburgh on Monday, June 4th. Our mother would leave for Johnstown on Tuesday, June 5th, after ensuring we were settled with Uncle Vincent. They would both return home together on Saturday, July 14th, exactly 6 weeks later. "You girls must promise to behave yourselves and not give your uncle any trouble," our mother instructed, as she packed her suitcase with the practical dresses and sensible shoes that would serve her well during her caregiving duties. "He's doing us a tremendous favor, and we don't want to take advantage of his generosity." Rebecca and I promised eagerly, excited about the prospect of increased freedom and adult treatment. We imagined staying up later than usual, maybe having friends over for dinner, and experiencing a taste of independence that most girls our age couldn't access. Uncle Vincent had hinted at special privileges, later curfews, occasional restaurant meals, and perhaps even a trip to the city to see a movie that our conservative parents might consider too mature. "We'll take good care of each other," I assured. Our mother, not knowing that those words would take on a meaning I could never have imagined. "6 weeks will pass quickly, and you'll be so proud of how responsible we've been." The last normal evening of our lives was Sunday, June 3rd, 1962. Our family attended evening service at church, came home to our mother's pot roast dinner, and spent the evening listening to Ed Sullivan on our massive television console. Rebecca and I painted each other's nails with pale pink polish, while our parents discussed the logistics of their upcoming departures. Uncle Vincent stopped by after dinner, bringing ice cream from Miller's drugstore and staying to watch television with us. He seemed relaxed and happy, joking with our father about the responsibilities of temporary fatherhood and complimenting our mother on her cooking. When he left that night, he kissed our mother's cheek, shook our father's hand, and ruffled our hair affectionately. "See you girls tomorrow evening," he said with that charming smile that had always made us feel special. "We're going to have quite an adventure together." None of us understood the true meaning of those words. None of us could have predicted that the next 6 weeks would shatter our innocence so completely that we would spend the rest of our lives trying to piece together some version of safety and trust. As I watched Uncle Vincent's taillights disappear down Maple Street that night, I felt nothing but anticipation for the grown-up summer that lay ahead. I had no way of knowing that I was watching evil drive away, only to return the next day with unlimited access to everything I held dear. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Monday morning, June 4th, 1962, arrived with the kind of crisp sunshine that promised a beautiful summer day. I woke to the sound of our father's alarm clock ringing through the thin walls at 5:15 a.m., 30 minutes earlier than usual because he needed extra time to load his suitcase into Mr. Patterson's truck. Our neighbor had agreed to drive him to the train station in exchange for father looking after his vegetable garden while he visited his sick brother in Ohio. Rebecca and I stumbled downstairs in our cotton nightgowns to say goodbye, our hair still messy from sleep and our eyes heavy with the early hour. Our father stood in the kitchen wearing his best suit, the navy blue one he reserved for church, and special occasions, holding a cup of coffee that steamed in the morning air. His usually confident demeanor seemed touched with nervousness, though he tried to hide it behind his typical authoritative manner. "Now you girls listen to your uncle and don't cause any trouble," he said, pulling us both into a rare embrace that smelled of Old Spice aftershave and the anxiety that comes with leaving one's family for an extended period. This opportunity could change our whole future, but only if I can focus on my studies without worrying about what's happening at home. Our mother bustled around the kitchen, packing sandwiches and fruit into his traveling bag while simultaneously preparing our breakfast and checking items off the mental list that seemed to constantly run through her mind. She had been up since 4 a.m., I later learned, double-checking his packed belongings and ensuring every detail was perfect for his important journey. "Eleanor, you're the older one, so I'm counting on you to help Rebecca remember her chores and keep the house tidy," our father continued, his hands resting heavily on my shoulders. "Vincent will handle the important decisions, but day-to-day things like cooking and cleaning are still your responsibility. Don't let him feel like he's babysitting children." The weight of that responsibility settled on my 20-year-old shoulders like a lead blanket. I had always been the responsible sister, the one who remembered to feed our cat Whiskers, who helped mother with canning vegetables from our garden, and who made sure Rebecca completed her homework before she was allowed to listen to her radio programs. Now I was expected to maintain an entire household while our temporary guardian focused on his banking career. When Mr. Patterson's truck rumbled into our driveway at 6:30 a.m., the morning suddenly took on a finality that hadn't seemed real during weeks of planning and preparation. Our father kissed our mother with uncharacteristic tenderness, touched our cheeks with his rough hands, and walked out the front door carrying the hopes and dreams of our entire family in his worn leather suitcase. We stood at the living room, window still in our nightgowns, watching the truck disappear around the corner of Elm Street. The house felt immediately different, as if his presence had been holding something in place that now threatened to shift and settle in unfamiliar ways. Our mother noticed it too, I think, because she spent the rest of the morning cleaning things that were already spotless and reorganizing drawers that had been perfectly organized for months. Uncle Vincent arrived that evening at 6:15 p.m., just as Rebecca and I were finishing the dinner preparations our mother had supervised before departing for Johnstown. He came through the front door without knocking, carrying a small suitcase and wearing the kind of confident smile that had always made adults in our family light up with pleasure and approval. "Well, well, look at my two favorite girls managing everything like proper little housewives," he said, setting down his suitcase and surveying the dining room table we had carefully set with our second-best china. "Something smells absolutely delicious in here. You might just spoil me completely before your parents return." The dinner conversation that first night seemed perfectly normal, filled with questions about our father's departure, updates about our mother's safe arrival at Aunt Dorothy's house, and Uncle Vincent's amusing stories about difficult customers at the bank. He complimented our cooking, helped clear the dishes, and even insisted on washing them while Rebecca and I dried and put everything away in Mother's precisely organized cabinets. "This arrangement is going to work out beautifully," he declared as we finished the evening cleanup. "You girls are so mature and responsible. I barely feel like I'm supervising anyone at all. We're more like roommates, really. 3 adults sharing a house and looking after each other." The word adults sent a small thrill through both Rebecca and me. We had never been referred to as adults by anyone in our family, and the designation made us stand a little straighter, smile a little brighter, and feel tremendously proud of our newfound status. Uncle Vincent seemed to understand exactly how to make us feel important and valued in ways our parents, loving as they were, had never quite managed. That first night, Uncle Vincent settled into our parents' bedroom rather than the guest room as originally planned. "The bed in here is more comfortable for my back," he explained when I questioned the change. "Your parents won't mind, and the guest room will be perfect for storing my work clothes where they won't get wrinkled." The explanation seemed reasonable, though something about it felt slightly wrong in a way I couldn't articulate. Our parents' bedroom had always been their private sanctuary, a place Rebecca and I entered only when specifically invited and never without permission. Seeing Uncle Vincent's belongings scattered across our mother's carefully maintained dresser top created a visual discord that made me vaguely uncomfortable. The second day brought our first real glimpse of how dramatically our routine would change. Uncle Vincent left for work at his usual time, 8:30 a.m., but not before establishing new rules that differed significantly from our parents' expectations. "We could sleep until 9 a.m. if we wanted," he announced. "We could invite friends over without asking permission first. We could choose our own bedtimes as long as we were awake and functional when he returned from work each evening." "I trust you girls to make good decisions," he said, adjusting his tie in our hallway mirror, while Rebecca and I ate breakfast at the kitchen table. "You don't need someone hovering over you every minute like children. We're all adults here, and adults respect each other's judgment and privacy." The freedom felt intoxicating at first. Rebecca immediately called her best friend, Nancy Hoffman, to arrange an afternoon visit that would have required lengthy negotiations and careful supervision under our parents' watchful eyes. I decided to tackle some deep cleaning projects I had been wanting to attempt, reorganizing our linen closet and scrubbing the baseboards in the living room with the thoroughness our mother would have appreciated. When Uncle Vincent returned that evening at 6:45 p.m., he seemed genuinely pleased with how we had spent our day. He praised the improvements I had made to the house, charmed Rebecca's friend Nancy during the few minutes before she had to leave for her own dinner, and settled into our father's favorite armchair with a cold beer and the evening newspaper as if he had been part of our family routine for years. "You see?" he said, looking up from the sports section as Rebecca and I finished our dinner preparations. "This is exactly what I meant about treating each other like adults. You girls handled your day perfectly without anyone micromanaging your choices. Your parents worry too much about things that don't need worrying about." The third evening brought our first real indication that Uncle Vincent's concept of adult treatment extended beyond simple household freedoms. After dinner, instead of retiring to the living room for our usual evening of television and quiet activities, he suggested we all sit together on the front porch swing to enjoy the warm June air and watch the neighborhood children play their twilight games of tag and hide and seek. The porch swing had been one of our father's weekend projects the previous summer, built from sturdy oak and suspended from the ceiling beams with heavy chains that could easily support the weight of our entire family. It was designed to seat 3 people comfortably, but Uncle Vincent positioned himself in the middle in a way that required Rebecca and me to sit quite close to him on either side. "This is much nicer than being stuck inside on such a beautiful evening," he said, stretching his arms along the back of the swing in a gesture that seemed natural and familial, but resulted in his hands resting just behind our shoulders. "We should do this every night. I bet your parents never thought to take advantage of such perfect porch-sitting weather." As we swayed gently in the evening breeze, Uncle Vincent began asking questions that seemed designed to draw out information about our personal lives, our friendships, our dreams and fears, and secret thoughts. He wanted to know which boys at school we found attractive, whether we had ever been kissed, what we imagined our future husbands would be like, and how we felt about the physical changes that came with growing into womanhood. The questions made me uncomfortable in a way I couldn't precisely identify. They weren't inappropriate exactly, but they ventured into territory that our parents had never explored with us, topics that seemed too private for adult-child conversations even between family members. Rebecca, always more trusting and open than I was, answered eagerly, clearly enjoying the rare experience of an adult treating her like a confidant rather than a child whose opinions were dismissed or ignored. "You're both becoming such beautiful young women," Uncle Vincent observed as the streetlights began flickering on, and the neighborhood children were called inside for baths and bedtime stories. "I bet the boys at school can hardly concentrate on their studies when you're around. You must drive them absolutely crazy with distraction." His voice carried a quality I had never heard before, softer and more intimate than his usual confident tone. When he spoke, his fingers had somehow shifted from the back of the swing to rest lightly on our shoulders, a touch that felt more deliberate and focused than the casual contact we were accustomed to receiving from adult relatives. "I think it's wonderful that we can talk about these things," he continued, his fingers beginning to move in small circles that could have been interpreted as absent-minded fidgeting, but felt increasingly intentional. "Your parents mean well, but they're quite old-fashioned about discussing the realities of growing up. They would probably be scandalized if they knew we were having such honest, mature conversations." That night, as Rebecca and I got ready for bed in the bathroom we shared, I found myself studying our reflections in the mirror above the sink. We did look different than we had even a few months earlier. Rebecca had developed curves that were becoming impossible to hide beneath her modest clothing, and her blonde hair had grown longer and more lustrous. I had grown taller and leaner, and my dark hair now reached almost to my waist when I wore it down instead of in the practical braids our mother preferred. Were we beautiful, as Uncle Vincent suggested? Were we driving boys to distraction? The idea had never occurred to me before, but looking at us through his eyes, I began to see possibilities and dangers that had previously remained invisible. We weren't children anymore, that much was clear, but we weren't fully adults either. We existed in some liminal space that felt both exciting and terrifying. "Do you think Uncle Vincent is right about us being beautiful?" Rebecca asked as we brushed our teeth side by side, her words slightly muffled by toothpaste foam. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "I never really thought about it before." "Well, I like that he notices," she said, spitting into the sink and rinsing her mouth with the thoroughness our mother had drilled into us since early childhood. "It makes me feel grown up and important, like I matter as a person, not just as someone's daughter or student." As I lay in my bed that night, listening to Rebecca's breathing settle into the deep rhythms of sleep in the room next to mine, I tried to understand why Uncle Vincent's attention left me feeling so unsettled. His words had been complimentary, his touches had been gentle, and his treatment of us had been respectful and age-appropriate. Yet something about the evening felt wrong in a way that my 20-year-old mind couldn't quite process or articulate. Had no experience with manipulation, no framework for understanding how predators gradually normalize inappropriate behavior, by mixing genuine kindness with subtle boundary violations. I didn't know that making someone feel special and mature was often the first step in a carefully orchestrated plan designed to exploit trust and vulnerability. All I knew was that our house felt different with Uncle Vincent in charge, and we were different too. The changes seemed positive on the surface. More freedom, more respect, more interesting conversations. But underneath the apparent improvements, something fundamental had shifted in ways that would soon become impossible to ignore. By the end of our first week under Uncle Vincent's care, a new normal had established itself in our household that would have been unrecognizable to our parents. The rigid schedule that had governed our lives for as long as I could remember had dissolved into a more fluid arrangement that seemed to revolve entirely around Uncle Vincent's whims and preferences. Our morning routine had transformed completely. Instead of waking at 6:30 a.m. to help prepare breakfast and pack lunches, Rebecca and I now slept until we naturally awakened, sometimes as late as 10 a.m. Uncle Vincent had taken to preparing his own breakfast before leaving for the bank, leaving us notes about his evening plans and suggestions for how we might spend our days. These notes, written in his precise handwriting on bank letterhead that he brought home from his office, felt sophisticated and adult in a way that our parents' verbal instructions never had. "Dear Eleanor and Rebecca," one typical note began, "I'll be working late tonight on the Henderson account, so don't wait dinner for me. Why don't you girls treat yourselves to hamburgers at Miller's drugstore? I've left money on the kitchen counter. Remember, you're young and beautiful. Enjoy yourselves. Love, Uncle Vincent." The money he left was always more than necessary, sometimes twice what we would need for the suggested activity. This generosity felt like further evidence of his trust in our maturity and his desire to treat us as equals rather than dependents. We had never had such free access to spending money, and the freedom to make our own choices about meals, entertainment, and daily activities felt intoxicating. Rebecca embraced these changes with the enthusiasm of someone who had been waiting her entire life for permission to make her own decisions. She began sleeping later, wearing makeup during the day, and inviting friends over without the careful advance planning our mother had always required. Her friend Nancy Hoffman became a regular presence in our house, and the two of them would spend hours experimenting with hairstyles, listening to popular music on our radio, and discussing the boys in their high school class with a freedom that would have scandalized our conservative parents. I found myself caught between appreciation for our newfound independence and a growing unease about the direction our household seemed to be heading. The relaxed atmosphere was undeniably pleasant, but it came with subtle pressures that I struggled to understand or articulate. Uncle Vincent's expectations for our appearance and behavior had begun to shift in ways that felt both flattering and uncomfortable. "You girls should dress up more often," he suggested one evening as we prepared dinner together in our small kitchen. "You're both so lovely, but you hide it under such practical clothing. Your mother means well, but she dresses you like Amish girls instead of the attractive young women you've become." To emphasize his point, he had brought home shopping bags from Richardson's department store, the most upscale clothing shop in Millbrook. Inside were dresses, skirts, and blouses that were more form-fitting and colorful than anything we had ever owned. The fabrics were softer, the cuts more fashionable, and the styles clearly designed to emphasize rather than conceal the female figure. "I hope you don't mind that I guessed at your sizes," he said, watching our faces carefully as we examined the beautiful new clothes. "I wanted to surprise you with something special. After all, you've been taking such good care of me and the house. You deserve to feel as pretty as you look." Rebecca was thrilled with the gifts, immediately rushing upstairs to try on a powder blue dress that hugged her developing figure in ways that our mother's careful alterations never had. When she returned to the kitchen for Uncle Vincent's approval, the transformation was startling. She looked at least 3 years older and unmistakably feminine in a way that felt both exciting and dangerous. "Absolutely stunning," Uncle Vincent declared, his eyes traveling over Rebecca's figure with an intensity that made my stomach flutter with unnamed anxiety. "You look like a movie star, sweetheart. Every boy in town is going to fall head over heels when they see you in that dress." His praise made Rebecca glow with pleasure, spinning in a circle to show off the dress's full skirt, while Uncle Vincent applauded appreciatively. The scene should have felt innocent, a generous uncle gifting his nieces with pretty clothes and complimenting their appearance. Instead, something about his focused attention and the way his gaze lingered on certain parts of Rebecca's body made me feel like I was witnessing something that crossed invisible boundaries I couldn't quite identify. When it was my turn to model the emerald green dress he had selected for me, Uncle Vincent's reaction was even more intense. The dress fit perfectly, its neckline lower than anything I had ever worn, and its waist cinched in a way that emphasized curves I had barely acknowledged I possessed. Looking at myself in our hallway mirror, I saw a woman where I expected to see a girl, and the transformation was both thrilling and terrifying. "Eleanor, you are absolutely breathtaking," Uncle Vincent said, his voice carrying that soft, intimate quality that had become increasingly familiar. "That color brings out your eyes beautifully. You look sophisticated, elegant, like you belong in New York City rather than little old Millbrook." His hands settled on my shoulders as we both looked at my reflection, and I could feel the warmth of his body behind me as he positioned himself close enough that his breath stirred the hair near my ear. "You're going to break hearts, beautiful girl," he murmured, his fingers beginning to trace the neckline of the dress in a gesture that felt far more intimate than anything I had ever experienced. That night marked the beginning of what I now recognize as a systematic escalation in Uncle Vincent's behavior toward us. The new clothes came with expectations about when and how they should be worn. He preferred us to dress up for dinner, even when we were eating at home. He enjoyed having us model different outfits for his approval. He took photographs of us with his expensive camera, saying he wanted to capture how lovely we looked, and perhaps send pictures to our parents to show how well we were being cared for. The photography sessions quickly became a regular evening activity that felt increasingly uncomfortable, despite Uncle Vincent's insistence that they were perfectly innocent. He would pose us in various locations around the house and yard, adjusting our positions with hands that lingered longer than necessary on our arms, waists, and shoulders. The directions he gave became more specific and personal as the days passed. "Turn your body toward me, Rebecca, but look over your shoulder. Yes, just like that. Now arch your back slightly. You want to show off your lovely figure. Eleanor, come stand behind your sister and put your hands on her shoulders. Perfect. You girls are such natural beauties. The camera absolutely loves you." The pictures themselves seemed harmless when we looked at them later. Just two sisters, posing prettily in their new clothes. But the process of taking them felt charged with an energy that made my skin crawl, even as part of me enjoyed the attention and praise. Uncle Vincent's focus during these sessions was total and consuming, as if Rebecca and I were the most fascinating subjects he had ever encountered. 2 weeks into our arrangement, Uncle Vincent suggested we begin eating our evening meals in the dining room rather than the kitchen, using our best china and silverware as if every dinner were a special occasion. He would light candles, pour wine for himself, and grape juice, for us in actual wine glasses, and encourage us to practice what he called sophisticated dinner conversation. These formal dinners became elaborate performances where Rebecca and I were expected to display our charm, intelligence, and developing social skills for Uncle Vincent's entertainment and evaluation. He would ask us to share stories about our days, our thoughts about current events, and our opinions about various topics that our parents had never considered appropriate for children to discuss. "What do you think about this business with Marilyn Monroe?" he asked one evening in late June, referring to the actress's recent death that had dominated newspaper headlines. "She was about your age when she became famous, you know. Beauty and talent can open doors that education and hard work sometimes can't. It's important for young women to understand their natural advantages. These conversations often veered into territory that felt adult and sophisticated, but also vaguely inappropriate in ways I couldn't articulate. Uncle Vincent seemed particularly interested in our thoughts about romance, marriage, and physical relationships between men and women. He would share stories about his own romantic experiences, describing dates and relationships with a level of detail that felt too intimate for uncle-niece conversations. "I've never met a woman as beautiful as you two girls," he told us one evening as we finished dessert by candlelight. "It's no wonder I've remained a bachelor all these years. How could any ordinary woman compare to spending time with such lovely, intelligent, interesting companions? You've both spoiled me completely for other female company." His words made me uncomfortable, but Rebecca seemed to bloom under this type of attention. She had begun spending extra time on her appearance, styling her hair in more sophisticated ways and wearing makeup that Uncle Vincent had purchased for her during one of his shopping expeditions. She laughed more freely at his jokes, engaged more enthusiastically in his conversations, and seemed to genuinely enjoy the role of dinner companion and entertainment that she was being asked to play. The shift in our relationship with Uncle Vincent became most apparent during our evening porch sessions, which had evolved from casual conversation into something that felt increasingly like courtship rituals. He would position himself between us on the swing, his arms around both our shoulders, drawing us close against him as we talked and watched the neighborhood settle into night. His touches during these intimate conversations had become bolder and more purposeful. What began as absent-minded shoulder rubs had progressed to deliberate caresses of our arms, backs, and faces. He would brush hair away from our eyes, trace the lines of our jawbones with gentle fingers, and hold our hands, while making what felt like romantic declarations about our beauty and specialness. "You girls are such good listeners," he would say, his thumbs tracing circles on the backs of our hands as we sat pressed against his sides. "Most women your age are so silly and frivolous, but you understand important things. You make me feel appreciated and valued in ways I've never experienced before." The physical intimacy of these moments felt both thrilling and wrong. Uncle Vincent's attention was intoxicating, making us feel mature and desirable in ways that were completely new to our limited experience. But underneath the pleasure of feeling special and chosen, a voice in my head whispered warnings that I tried desperately to ignore. By the end of June, our house had become a place our parents would not have recognized. The careful order and modest propriety that had characterized our family life had been replaced by an atmosphere of indulgence and adult sophistication that felt both exciting and dangerous. Rebecca and I had been transformed from obedient daughters into something that resembled young women being courted by a charming and generous suitor. The progression had been so gradual and seemingly innocent that I couldn't identify any specific moment when things had crossed a line from appropriate to inappropriate. Uncle Vincent had never said or done anything that was explicitly wrong, yet everything about our relationship with him felt fundamentally different from what family relationships were supposed to be. As July approached and we reached the halfway point of our parents' absence, I began to realize that we were no longer the same girls who had waved goodbye to our father from our front window just 3 weeks earlier. Something essential had changed, and there would be no returning to the innocence and simplicity we had lost, even if I couldn't yet understand exactly what we had traded it for. The first week of July brought a heat wave that settled over Millbrook, like a suffocating blanket, making our small house feel cramped and airless despite our efforts to create cross breezes with strategically opened windows and rotating fans. The oppressive weather seemed to intensify everything. Emotions ran higher, patience wore thinner, and the atmosphere in our house grew charged with an energy that felt both electric and dangerous. Uncle Vincent had taken vacation days from the Han bank, claiming he wanted to spend more quality time with us before our parents returned. "I'm going to miss you girls terribly when this arrangement ends," he explained as he announced his plans to be home for an entire week. "I want to make the most of our remaining time together. We'll have such wonderful adventures." The prospect of having Uncle Vincent at home all day created a mixture of excitement and anxiety that I couldn't fully understand. On one hand, his constant presence meant no more lonely afternoons or evenings when Rebecca and I felt the weight of managing the household entirely on our own. On the other hand, something about the intensity of his attention had begun to feel overwhelming in ways that made me want to retreat to the safety of routine and predictability. His first day home began innocently enough. He prepared an elaborate breakfast of pancakes, fresh fruit, and bacon, while Rebecca and I slept late, surprising us with the feast when we finally emerged from our bedrooms around 10 a.m. The kitchen smelled wonderful, and the table was set with our best dishes and cloth napkins as if we were celebrating a special occasion. "Today marks the beginning of our special week together," he announced as we gathered around the dining room table in our cotton nightgowns and robes. "I want to do things we've never done before, create memories that will last long after your parents return and spoil this perfect arrangement we've developed." The casual intimacy of sharing breakfast in our nightclothes, while Uncle Vincent was fully dressed, created an imbalance that felt both thrilling and inappropriate. He seemed completely comfortable with our state of undress, complimenting how pretty we looked even first thing in the morning and joking about how lucky he was to have such beautiful breakfast companions. "Most bachelors eat their morning meals alone with nothing but the newspaper for company," he said, reaching across the table to tuck a strand of Rebecca's hair behind her ear. "I get to start my day looking at two lovely faces and listening to sweet voices. I'm the most fortunate man in Pennsylvania." After breakfast, Uncle Vincent suggested we spend the day at Clearwater Lake, a popular swimming and picnic spot about 20 minutes outside of town. He had packed a picnic basket while we were still sleeping, filled with sandwiches, fruit, and cold drinks that would keep us comfortable during a long day in the sun. The excursion felt sophisticated and adult. Most of our previous trips to the lake had been large family affairs with multiple families and extensive supervision. "We'll have the place practically to ourselves on a weekday," Uncle Vincent explained as we prepared to leave. "Much more relaxing than fighting crowds of screaming children and gossiping mothers on the weekends. We can swim, sunbathe, and enjoy each other's company without any distractions." The suggestion that we change into our swimming suits for the trip created the first moment of real discomfort I had experienced since our arrangement began. Rebecca and I owned modest one-piece suits that our mother had purchased for us the previous summer, designed more for utility than attractiveness. The idea of wearing them in front of Uncle Vincent felt different from wearing them around our parents or other family members, though I couldn't articulate why. Uncle Vincent seemed to sense my hesitation. "Don't be shy, Eleanor," he said gently, his hand resting on my shoulder in what was becoming his characteristic gesture of comfort and reassurance. "There's nothing inappropriate about swimming attire at a swimming location. You're both such lovely girls. You should be proud of how beautiful you are instead of hiding behind unnecessary modesty." At the lake, Uncle Vincent's behavior became more openly admiring of our physical appearance than it had ever been at home. He complimented our figures in our swimming suits, commented on how the sun brought out highlights in our hair, and took numerous photographs of us posing on the beach and playing in the shallow water. His camera seemed to capture every moment, Rebecca laughing as she splashed in the lake, me reading a book on our blanket, both of us building sandcastles like children despite our supposedly adult status. "You girls are absolutely stunning," he said repeatedly throughout the day, his eyes following our movements with an intensity that made me increasingly self-conscious. "The camera loves you both. You could be models or actresses if you wanted. You have that special quality that makes people want to look at you." The day grew more uncomfortable as Uncle Vincent began applying sunscreen to our backs and shoulders with hands that lingered far longer than necessary. His touches became more deliberate and exploratory, fingers tracing the edges of our swimming suits and caressing skin that had never been touched by anyone outside our immediate family. "You don't want to burn," he explained as his hands moved across my back in slow, circular motions that felt nothing like the practical application of sunscreen I was familiar with. "Your skin is so soft and perfect. We need to take good care of it." when he insisted on applying sunscreen to the front of our bodies as well, claiming we were too inexperienced to cover all the necessary areas properly, I knew we had crossed into territory that felt fundamentally wrong. His hands moved across our shoulders, arms, and the exposed portions of our chests with a deliberate intimacy that had nothing to do with sun protection and everything to do with an adult man touching young women's bodies for his own pleasure. Rebecca seemed less troubled by these interactions than I was, perhaps because Uncle Vincent's attention made her feel mature and desirable in ways she had never experienced. She giggled and blushed under his ministrations, clearly enjoying the sensation of being found attractive and worthy of careful attention. "Uncle Vincent makes me feel so grown-up and special," she confided to me during one of our brief moments, alone while he walked to the car to retrieve more cold drinks from his cooler. "Nobody has ever treated me like I was really beautiful before. It makes me feel important and valued, like I'm worth noticing." That evening, after we returned home sunburned and exhausted from our day at the lake, Uncle Vincent suggested we cool off with cold baths before dinner. The suggestion itself wasn't inappropriate. We were all overheated and sandy from our beach excursion. But when he offered to help us wash our hair and apply cooling lotion to our sunburned skin, the offer carried implications that made my stomach churn with anxiety. "Let me take care of you girls," he said in that soft, intimate voice that had become so familiar. "You've gotten too much sun today, and you need someone to make sure you're properly cared for. I have experience treating sunburn. I'll make sure you're comfortable and pain-free." The bath that followed was the first time an adult man had seen me undress since I was a small child, and the experience felt simultaneously humiliating and strangely exciting. Uncle Vincent's hands moved over my body with clinical efficiency as he applied aloe vera lotion to my reddened skin, but his touches were far more intimate and exploratory than any medical treatment I had ever received. "Such beautiful, perfect skin," he murmured as his hands moved across my shoulders and back. "You're becoming such a lovely woman, Eleanor. Every day you become more beautiful, more desirable. Soon you'll have men lining up for the chance to court you." When it was Rebecca's turn, I listened from my bedroom as similar interactions played. Out in the bathroom, her giggles and his murmured compliments creating a soundtrack that made me feel sick with an emotion I couldn't name. The sounds that drifted through our thin walls suggested that Rebecca was enjoying the attention and physical contact in ways that frightened me more than my own discomfort had. That night, as we lay in our respective bedrooms with only a thin wall separating us from Uncle Vincent and our parents' room, I heard sounds that would haunt me for the rest of my life. Soft footsteps in the hallway, a door opening and closing. Rebecca's voice, initially surprised but not alarmed. Then silence, followed by sounds that I was too young and inexperienced to fully understand, but old enough to know were wrong. I lay frozen in my bed, my heart pounding so loudly I was certain it could be heard throughout the house. Every instinct told me to get up, to intervene, to somehow protect my sister from whatever was happening in the room next to mine. But I was paralyzed by fear, confusion, and a terrible understanding that our family's carefully constructed world was collapsing around us. When the sounds finally stopped and I heard Uncle Vincent's footsteps returning to our parents' bedroom, I remained motionless for what felt like hours, staring at the ceiling and trying to process what I had witnessed. Rebecca never cried out, never called for help, never gave any indication that she was being hurt or forced into anything against her will. But something fundamental had changed in our house that night, and I knew with awful certainty that our childhood had ended forever. The next morning, Rebecca seemed different, older somehow, carrying herself with a new awareness that hadn't been there the day before. She was quieter during breakfast, more reserved in her interactions with Uncle Vincent, but also more possessive of his attention in ways that made me feel like an outsider in my own home. "Did you sleep well, sweetheart?" Uncle Vincent asked, her with particular tenderness, his hand resting on her shoulder as she ate her breakfast. "Yes," she replied softly, not meeting his eyes but not pulling away from his touch either. Very well. I wanted to ask her what had happened, to somehow address the terrible knowledge that sat between us like a living thing. But the words wouldn't come, and the opportunity never presented itself. Uncle Vincent seemed determined to keep us both busy and entertained, planning activities that would prevent any private conversations between Rebecca and me. Over the following days, a new pattern established itself in our household. Uncle Vincent would spend his days lavishing attention on both of us, but his evenings were increasingly devoted to Rebecca in ways that excluded me entirely. After dinner, they would disappear together, sometimes to the porch swing, sometimes to the living room, sometimes to her bedroom, leaving me to clean up and occupy myself with solitary activities. I began to understand that I was witnessing the systematic seduction and abuse of my younger sister, but I had no framework for processing this knowledge or determining how to respond. Uncle Vincent had never threatened us directly, never used force or violence, never demanded our silence through intimidation. Instead, he had created an atmosphere where Rebecca felt special and chosen, where his attention felt like a privilege, rather than a violation. The isolation I felt during those final weeks was crushing. I couldn't talk to Rebecca because she seemed to be willingly participating in whatever relationship had developed between them. I couldn't call our parents because I didn't have words to explain what was happening, and because Uncle Vincent had carefully cultivated our sense that we were now adults capable of handling adult situations independently. I couldn't seek help from neighbors or other adults because nothing that was happening appeared overtly criminal or abusive to outside observers. Uncle Vincent was still the charming, successful bank manager who was generously caring for his nieces during a family emergency. Rebecca and I were still the well-behaved girls who were managing our household responsibilities with admirable maturity. As our parents' return date approached, I found myself caught between desperate anticipation and terrible dread. I wanted our normal family life to resume, wanted the safety and predictability that Uncle Vincent's presence had destroyed. But I also knew that whatever had happened during these weeks could never be undone, and that our family would never be the same again. The truth was that both Rebecca and I had been irrevocably changed by our experiences under Uncle Vincent's care. Though in very different ways. She had been groomed and abused by someone she trusted, while I had been forced to witness her victimization without understanding how to intervene or protect her. When July 14th finally arrived and we heard our parents' car pulling into the driveway, I realized that our real ordeal was just beginning. The difficult weeks under Uncle Vincent's supervision had been terrible, but the challenge of returning to normal family life while carrying the secrets of what had happened would prove to be even more devastating than the original trauma itself. Saturday, July 14th, 1962, dawned gray and humid, with heavy clouds that threatened afternoon thunderstorms and seemed to press down on our small house like a physical weight. I had been awake since 4 a.m., listening to the sounds of Uncle Vincent moving around in our parents' bedroom as he packed his belongings and prepared to return to his bachelor apartment above Henderson's pharmacy. The house felt different that morning, charged with an energy that was part anticipation and part dread. Our parents were expected to arrive by noon, and Uncle Vincent had spent the previous evening coaching Rebecca and me on what we should and shouldn't say about our 6 weeks together. "Your parents will ask questions," he had said the night before, his arms around both of us as we sat on the porch swing for what he claimed would be the last time. "They'll want to know if you were happy, if you felt safe, if I took good care of you. The truth is that we've all taken care of each other beautifully, haven't we?" His words carried an undertone that wasn't quite threatening but wasn't entirely innocent either. Rebecca had nodded eagerly, pressing closer against his side in a gesture that had become second nature over the past weeks. I had remained silent, my stomach churning with emotions I couldn't name or process. "We've become so close," Uncle Vincent continued, his fingers tracing patterns on Rebecca's arm that I recognized as intimate gestures rather than casual family affection. What we've shared together is special and private. Your parents wouldn't understand the mature relationship we've developed. They still see you as children, but we know better, don't we? The implication was clear without being explicitly stated. What had happened during our weeks alone was to remain our secret. Not because it was wrong, but because other people were too narrow-minded to understand the sophistication of our arrangement. Uncle Vincent had successfully convinced Rebecca that their relationship was a privilege rather than a violation, something to be protected rather than reported. As I helped prepare breakfast that final morning, I watched Rebecca move around our kitchen with a new awareness of her own body and power that hadn't existed 6 weeks earlier. She had learned to use her beauty and charm as tools for gaining attention and approval, skills that Uncle Vincent had deliberately cultivated through his careful program of compliments, gifts, and special treatment. "I'm going to miss our morning talks," Uncle Vincent said to Rebecca as we sat down to eat, his hand covering hers on the table in a gesture that would have looked like normal family affection to any outside observer. "You've become such a thoughtful conversationalist. Most women your age have nothing interesting to say, but you understand important things about life and relationships." Rebecca glowed under this praise, as she always did when Uncle Vincent acknowledged her supposed maturity and sophistication. She had come to depend on his validation in ways that frightened me, seeking his approval for every decision and looking to him for confirmation of her worth and attractiveness. "I'll miss you too," she replied softly, her voice carrying an intimacy that made me want to leave the room. "These weeks have been the best of my whole life. I've never felt so grown up and important before." By 10 a.m., Uncle Vincent had finished his packing and was preparing to leave before our parents arrived. He claimed this arrangement would be easier for everyone, avoiding awkward transitions and allowing us to settle back into our normal family routine without the confusion of overlapping authority figures. "Besides," he said with that charming smile that had once made me feel special but now made my skin crawl, "your parents will want to hear all about your adventures without me hovering around making everyone self-conscious. You girls can tell them whatever you think they need to know." The goodbye scene that followed was unlike anything I had ever witnessed between family members. Uncle Vincent hugged me with what felt like genuine affection, kissing my cheek and thanking me for being such a responsible and helpful young woman during our time together. But his farewell with Rebecca was something entirely different. He held her for what seemed like minutes rather than seconds, his hands moving across her back in caresses that were far too intimate for an uncle saying goodbye to his niece. He whispered things in her ear that made her blush and smile, promises about future visits and references to their special understanding that would continue even after our parents' return. "Remember what we talked about," he said to both of us as he picked up his suitcase and prepared to leave. "Remember how mature and responsible you've both become. Don't let anyone make you feel like you need to go backward to being treated like children again." After his car disappeared around the corner of Elm Street, Rebecca and I spent the next 2 hours in frantic preparation for our parents' arrival. We cleaned the house with an intensity that went far beyond normal tidiness, scrubbing surfaces that were already spotless and organizing spaces that were already perfectly arranged. The activity helped mask the anxiety we both felt, though for very different reasons. Rebecca seemed nervous about returning to our family's more restrictive routines after weeks of unprecedented freedom and adult treatment. She had grown accustomed to making her own decisions about everything from her bedtime to her clothing choices, and the prospect of returning to our parents' careful supervision felt like a step backward rather than a return to normalcy. I was terrified about maintaining the secrets that Uncle Vincent had carefully cultivated during our weeks together. I knew that something fundamentally wrong had happened under our roof, but I also knew that I lacked the vocabulary and understanding to explain the situation to adults who had trusted Uncle Vincent completely with our safety and well-being. When we finally heard our father's car in the driveway at 12:30 p.m., followed by our mother's excited voice calling our names, The relief I expected to feel was overshadowed by a terrible anxiety about the performance I was about to give. We rushed outside to meet them, embracing our parents with enthusiasm that felt both genuine and forced. "My beautiful girls," our mother exclaimed, holding us both tightly against her as if she could make up for 6 weeks of separation with the intensity of her welcome. "How I've missed you. Let me look at you both. You've grown so much. Eleanor, you look so sophisticated, and Rebecca, you've become such a young lady." The changes our mother observed were more significant than she could have imagined. We had indeed grown during our time under Uncle Vincent's care, but not in the healthy, natural ways that parents expect their children to develop during a summer apart. We had been forced into premature adulthood through experiences that no children should ever have to navigate. Our father seemed tired from his weeks of intensive training, but proud of the accomplishment his hard work represented. He had successfully completed the program and been offered the promotion he had hoped for, along with a substantial increase in salary that would transform our family's financial prospects. "This changes everything for us," he announced as we gathered around our kitchen table for the reunion lunch our mother had insisted on preparing despite her own exhaustion from the long drive home. "The promotion means better pay, better benefits, and opportunities for you girls that I never had when I was growing up." The conversation during lunch focused on our parents' experiences during their separation, our father's training program, our mother's weeks caring for Aunt Dorothy and the new baby, the challenges and rewards they had both encountered during their time away. Rebecca and I were asked general questions about our weeks with Uncle Vincent, but nothing that required detailed explanations or uncomfortable revelations. "Vincent took excellent care of you, I'm sure," our mother said, noticing the new dresses we were wearing and the more sophisticated way Rebecca had styled her hair. "He always was good with children, even when we were young. You girls look so healthy and happy. I can tell you've been well looked after." Rebecca and I exchanged glances across the table, a moment of shared understanding about the secrets we were keeping and the performance we were giving. We confirmed that Uncle Vincent had been wonderful, that we had felt safe and happy, that we had managed our household responsibilities successfully, and that we had enjoyed our increased independence and freedom. None of these statements were technically lies, but they omitted the crucial truth about what our supposed safety and happiness had actually cost us. We had indeed been well-fed, well-clothed, and protected from external dangers. But we had not been protected from the most insidious threat of all, the trusted family member who had used his position of authority to exploit our vulnerability and innocence. The afternoon brought a gradual return to our family's normal routines, but the transition felt awkward and artificial in ways that our parents attributed to natural readjustment after weeks of separation. Rebecca seemed sullen and withdrawn, clearly missing the attention and special treatment she had become accustomed to receiving from Uncle Vincent. I felt hyper-vigilant and anxious, constantly afraid that I might accidentally reveal something about our experiences that would shatter our family's carefully reconstructed harmony. That evening, as we sat around our dining room table for our first family dinner in 6 weeks, I realized that the most difficult part of our ordeal was just beginning. Living with Uncle Vincent's abuse had been terrible, but maintaining the silence he had demanded while pretending that nothing had changed felt almost impossible. Our mother had prepared our father's favorite meal to celebrate his homecoming: pot roast with vegetables from our garden, fresh bread, and apple pie made from fruit she had canned the previous fall. The familiar smells and tastes should have felt comforting after weeks of different cooking and eating arrangements, but instead they reminded me of everything we had lost during our parents' absence. "Tell us about some of the things you girls did while we were away," our father prompted as we finished the main course. "Vincent mentioned in his letters that you were keeping busy with various activities and projects." The question hung in the air like a challenge, requiring us to construct a narrative about our summer that would satisfy our parents' curiosity without revealing any information that might prompt further investigation. Rebecca and I had discussed this moment during our morning of preparation, but we hadn't anticipated how difficult it would be to speak casually about experiences that felt so charged with hidden meanings. "We went to Clearwater Lake one day," Rebecca offered, her voice carefully neutral. "Uncle Vincent took pictures of us swimming and having a picnic. We read books, helped with household projects, and spent time with friends from the neighborhood." Every word she spoke was true, but the innocent activities she described had been layered with inappropriate attention and boundary violations that transformed harmless summer fun into something that felt dangerous and wrong. The photographs Uncle Vincent had taken, for instance, were technically just pictures of two girls enjoying a day at the lake, but the process of posing for them had involved intimate touches and sexualized commentary that made the images feel exploitative rather than innocent. "It sounds like you had a wonderful time," our mother said, clearly pleased that her daughters had enjoyed their unusual summer arrangement. "Vincent was so generous to take time away from his own life to care for you. We'll have to think of a special way to thank him for everything he did for our family." The suggestion that we should be grateful to Uncle Vincent for his care during our parents' absence made my stomach turn with revulsion. But I smiled and nodded along with Rebecca, maintaining the fiction that we had been the fortunate recipients of a generous family member's kindness, rather than the victims of a carefully orchestrated campaign of manipulation and abuse. As we cleaned up after dinner and prepared for our first night back under our parents' protection, I felt the full weight of the burden that Uncle Vincent had placed on our shoulders. We were now responsible for maintaining a lie that protected not only him, but also our parents' peace of mind and our family's reputation in the community. The secret we were keeping wasn't just about what had happened during those 6 weeks in the summer of 1962. It was about the fundamental question of whether the adults who were supposed to protect us could actually be trusted to handle the truth about our experiences. Uncle Vincent had convinced us that revealing what had happened would destroy our family rather than heal it, and at the ages of 20 and 18, we weren't equipped to challenge that assessment. That night, as I lay in my own bed listening to the familiar sounds of our house settling around us, I realized that our real imprisonment was just beginning. The physical abuse might be over, but the psychological chains that Uncle Vincent had forged during our weeks together would prove to be far more durable and devastating than anything he had done to our bodies. The weeks following our parents' return brought a peculiar form of torture that I hadn't anticipated during those final days under Uncle Vincent's supervision. While I had dreaded the challenge of maintaining our secrets, I hadn't understood how exhausting it would be to constantly monitor every word, every expression, every reaction to ensure that nothing slipped out that might reveal what had really happened during our supposed carefree summer. Our house felt different now, though our parents attributed any changes to natural adjustments after their extended absence. The routines that had once felt comforting and predictable now seemed restrictive and childish after weeks of unprecedented freedom. Rebecca, in particular, struggled with returning to our family's expectations about appropriate behavior, clothing, choices, and social activities. "I don't understand why I can't wear the blue dress Uncle Vincent bought me to church," she argued with our mother one Sunday morning in late July, her voice carrying a petulance that would have been unthinkable before our parents left. "It's pretty and fits perfectly. What's wrong with wanting to look nice for worship service?" Our mother examined the dress with the careful eye of someone who had spent decades navigating the delicate balance between modesty and attractiveness. That was expected of young women in our conservative community. The neckline was lower than anything she would have purchased for Rebecca, and the cut emphasized curves that our mother preferred to keep discreetly concealed. "It's a beautiful dress, sweetheart, but perhaps too sophisticated for a girl your age," she said diplomatically. "Save it for special occasions when you're a few years older. For now, let's stick with something more appropriate for Sunday worship." The compromise our mother suggested, wearing the dress to special events rather than regular church services, seemed reasonable to an outside observer. But I could see the frustration and disappointment in Rebecca's face as she reluctantly changed into one of her older, more conservative outfits. Uncle Vincent had convinced her that she was mature enough to make her own decisions about her appearance, and returning to parental oversight felt like a betrayal of the adult status she believed she had earned. These small conflicts over clothing, curfews, and social activities created a constant undercurrent of tension in our household that our parents couldn't understand. They saw normal teenage rebellion and adjustment difficulties, where Rebecca and I were actually struggling with the impossible task of reconciling two completely different versions of ourselves: the responsible daughters our parents expected us to be, and the sophisticated young women Uncle Vincent had convinced us we had become. The most difficult challenge came during our parents' attempts to express gratitude to Uncle Vincent for his care during their absence. Our father had decided that a simple thank you wasn't sufficient acknowledgement for the sacrifice his brother had made on our family's behalf, and he began planning an elaborate dinner party to honor Uncle Vincent's generosity and kindness. "We'll invite the Hendersons, the Pattersons, and maybe the Williams family," our father announced one evening as he outlined his plans for the celebration. "Vincent deserves recognition for what he did for us. Not many bachelors would give up 6 weeks of their freedom to care for someone else's children." The prospect of sitting through an entire evening where Uncle Vincent was praised and honored for his supposed devotion to our welfare made me feel physically sick. But there was no way to object without raising questions about why I didn't want to participate in thanking someone who had allegedly taken such good care of us. Rebecca's reaction to the planned celebration was even more concerning than my own dread. She seemed excited about the opportunity to see Uncle Vincent again, spending extra time on her appearance, and asking our mother if she could wear one of the special dresses he had purchased for her during our weeks together. "I want to look nice for Uncle Vincent," she explained when our mother questioned her unusual attention to her outfit and makeup. "He always made me feel so pretty and grown up. I want him to see that I still remember everything he taught me about being a lady." The evening of the dinner party arrived on a sweltering Saturday in early August, with our house filled with the smells of our mother's most elaborate cooking and the sounds of our neighbors gathering to honor Uncle Vincent's supposed sacrifice on our behalf. I moved through the preparations like someone walking through a nightmare, smiling and nodding at appropriate moments while feeling completely disconnected from the celebratory atmosphere around me. Uncle Vincent arrived fashionably late, as always, carrying flowers for our mother and small gifts for Rebecca and me that he presented with theatrical flourish. The gifts were books, classic literature that he claimed would help further our education and sophisticate our tastes. To our parents and neighbors, the presents seemed thoughtful and appropriate. To me, they felt like reminders of his continued presence in our lives and his expectation that our special relationship would continue despite our parents' return. "Vincent has always had such excellent taste in literature," our mother commented, as she examined the leather-bound volumes he had selected. "Girls, you should thank your uncle for thinking of your education, even when he's not responsible for supervising you anymore." The dinner conversation centered around Uncle Vincent's account of our 6 weeks together, a carefully crafted narrative that painted him as the patient, indulgent guardian who had allowed us unprecedented freedom while ensuring our safety and well-being. He described our household management, our social activities, and our personal growth with the skill of someone who had rehearsed every detail to create the most favorable possible impression. "The girls were absolutely wonderful," he told our assembled neighbors and family friends. "So mature and responsible. I barely felt like I was supervising anyone at all. We became more like friends sharing a house than guardian and children." Eleanor managed the cooking and cleaning with the skill of a woman twice her age, and Rebecca blossomed into such a charming and sophisticated young lady. Every word he spoke was technically accurate, but the innocent picture he painted bore no resemblance to the reality Rebecca and I had experienced. Our maturity had been forced rather than natural. Our friendship with him had been manipulative rather than genuine. And Rebecca's sophistication had come at a cost that no 18-year-old should ever have to pay. Throughout the evening, I watched Uncle Vincent work the room with the same charm and manipulative skill he had used on Rebecca and me during our weeks alone. He told amusing stories about our supposed adventures, accepted praise for his generosity with humble grace, and managed to make himself appear both self-sacrificing and heroic without ever claiming credit for anything inappropriate or self-serving. James, you're lucky to have a brother willing to make such a sacrifice, Mr. Henderson commented as the men gathered on our front porch after dinner. Not many single men would give up their freedom to care for teenage girls for 6 weeks. Vincent must really love this family. Our father glowed with pride at having such a generous and devoted brother, completely unaware that the man he was, praising, had spent those 6 weeks systematically abusing the daughters he had trusted to Uncle Vincent's care. The irony was so sharp it felt like a physical pain in my chest. But the most disturbing part of the evening came when I observed the interaction between Uncle Vincent and Rebecca during the social portion of the party. She had positioned herself near him throughout the evening, hanging on his words with an attention that seemed excessive even for a grateful niece thanking a generous uncle. When he complimented her appearance, she blushed and preened with obvious pleasure. When he asked about her plans for the remainder of the summer, she answered with an eagerness that suggested she was hoping he might offer to spend more time with her. When he casually touched her arm or shoulder during conversation, she didn't pull away, but instead seemed to lean into the contact. The other adults interpreted Rebecca's behavior as normal family affection and gratitude, but I recognized the signs of someone who had been groomed to crave attention and validation from her abuser. Uncle Vincent had successfully convinced Rebecca that their relationship was special and valuable, something to be cherished rather than feared or reported. Later that evening, after our guests had departed and our parents had gone to bed, Rebecca came to my room for what she claimed would be a sisterly conversation about the evening's events. But instead of discussing the party or our parents' friends, she wanted to talk about Uncle Vincent and how much she had enjoyed seeing him again. "Didn't he look handsome tonight?" she asked, sitting on the edge of my bed with a dreamy expression. That made my stomach turn. "And he was so charming with everyone. I could tell all the ladies thought he was wonderful. Mrs. Henderson was practically flirting with him during dessert." The jealousy in Rebecca's voice when she mentioned Mrs. Henderson's attention to Uncle Vincent revealed the depth of the emotional manipulation he had achieved during our weeks together. Rebecca wasn't just grateful to Uncle Vincent for his care. She had developed feelings for him that went far beyond appropriate family affection. "Rebecca," I said carefully, trying to find words that might help her understand the reality of our situation, without directly confronting beliefs that Uncle Vincent had carefully instilled. "Don't you think it's time we started focusing on boys our own age? Maybe thinking about dating and normal teenage relationships?" Her response chilled me to the bone. "Boys our age are so immature and silly," she said dismissively. "They don't understand anything about treating a woman with respect and sophistication. Uncle Vincent showed me what it's like to be appreciated by a real man who knows how to make a woman feel special and valued." The psychological damage Uncle Vincent had inflicted on my sister was becoming more apparent with each passing day. He had convinced her that his abuse was actually superior treatment, that his attention was more valuable than age-appropriate relationships, and that the experience he had given her was something to be treasured rather than healed from. Over the following weeks, Rebecca's behavior became increasingly concerning as she struggled to readjust to normal family life after her weeks of inappropriate adult attention. She became moody and withdrawn when our parents enforced their usual rules about curfews and social activities. She showed little interest in spending time with friends her own age, claiming they were too immature and boring compared to the sophisticated conversations she had enjoyed with Uncle Vincent. Most alarming of all, she began finding excuses to visit Uncle Vincent at his apartment or the bank, claiming she needed to thank him for various kindnesses or ask his advice about important decisions. Our parents saw these visits as evidence of appropriate gratitude and family bonding, but I recognized them as signs that Rebecca was trying to maintain the inappropriate relationship that Uncle Vincent had cultivated during our weeks under his supervision. "I stopped by the bank today to ask Uncle Vincent about which books I should read this fall," she announced one afternoon, her face glowing with the same pleasure she had shown during our weeks alone with him. "He's so intelligent and well-educated. He always knows exactly what will help me become more sophisticated and worldly." The pattern that was emerging terrified me more than the original abuse had. Uncle Vincent had successfully created a situation where Rebecca would continue to seek out his attention and validation, giving him ongoing access to her even after our parents' return. He had transformed her from a victim who might eventually report his abuse into an unwilling participant who would protect his secrets and facilitate his continued presence in her life. I began to understand that the 6 weeks of summer 1962 had been only the beginning of Uncle Vincent's long-term plan for maintaining inappropriate relationships with both Rebecca and me. By convincing Rebecca that she was mature enough for adult relationships and special enough to deserve his exclusive attention, he had ensured that she would continue to make herself available to him indefinitely. The weight of this realization, that our nightmare was not over but had simply entered a new and potentially more dangerous phase, left me feeling more helpless and isolated than I had even during our worst moments under Uncle Vincent's direct supervision. At least during those weeks, I had known that our parents would eventually return and rescue us. Now I realized that there might be no rescue coming, because the very people who should have protected us couldn't see that we still needed protection. September arrived with the crisp promise of autumn and the resumption of normal routines that should have brought comfort, but instead intensified my growing anxiety about Rebecca's relationship with Uncle Vincent. As we prepared to return to school, Rebecca to her senior year of high school, and me to my job as a secretary at Morrison Manufacturing, I realized that our structured daily schedules would provide Uncle Vincent with even more opportunities to maintain contact with my sister without parental supervision. The job at Morrison Manufacturing had been arranged by our father as part of the improved opportunities his promotion had created for our family. As the plant supervisor's daughter, I was offered a position in the main office that paid well and would provide valuable experience in business operations. Under normal circumstances, I would have been thrilled by this opportunity for independence and professional growth. Instead, the prospect of leaving Rebecca alone for 8 hours each day filled me with dread. "I'm so proud of both my girls," our father announced over breakfast on the morning before school resumed. Eleanor starting her first real job, and Rebecca beginning her final year before graduation. "This family is really moving up in the world thanks to all the hard work and opportunities we've created together." The pride in his voice should have made me feel accomplished and valued, but instead it reminded me how much our family's happiness depended on maintaining the fiction that nothing had changed during our summer under Uncle Vincent's care. Our parents' joy in our supposed maturity and growth would be shattered if they learned the true cost of the sophistication they were praising. Rebecca had enrolled in advanced courses for her senior year, including college preparatory classes, that would position her for acceptance to a good university if she maintained her grades and continued demonstrating the responsibility she had supposedly developed over the summer. Our parents saw these academic achievements as evidence that Uncle Vincent's influence had been entirely positive, encouraging intellectual growth and mature decision-making. "Vincent always said you had the intelligence for higher education," our mother commented as she helped Rebecca organize her school supplies. "He saw potential in you that perhaps we hadn't fully recognized. It's wonderful that his encouragement helped you set such ambitious goals for yourself." The credit our mother gave Uncle Vincent for Rebecca's academic motivation made me want to scream with frustration. Every positive change in our lives was being attributed to his beneficial influence, creating a narrative where he appeared as the catalyst for our family's upward mobility rather than the predator who had violated our trust and safety. My first week at Morrison Manufacturing provided a welcome distraction from the constant vigilance I felt compelled to maintain regarding Rebecca's activities and whereabouts. The office environment was professional and demanding, requiring me to learn new skills quickly and adapt to adult workplace expectations that were entirely different from the household responsibilities I had previously managed. My supervisor, Mrs. Caroline Fletcher, was a woman in her 40s who had worked her way up from receptionist to office manager through competence and determination rather than family connections. She treated me with the respect due to a capable employee while maintaining clear expectations about quality and professionalism that challenged me in ways I found both intimidating and exhilarating. "You have excellent organizational skills and attention to detail," she observed after my first week of training. "With the right experience and education, you could have a real career in business administration. Don't let anyone convince you that marriage is your only option for security and success." Mrs. Fletcher's encouragement meant more to me than she could have known. During our weeks with Uncle Vincent, I had been constantly told that my primary value lay in my physical attractiveness and ability to please men. Having an accomplished woman recognize my intellectual capabilities and professional potential felt like a lifeline to a version of myself that existed beyond the trauma I was carrying. But my sense of growing confidence at work was undermined by increasingly disturbing developments in Rebecca's behavior at home. She had resumed her visits to Uncle Vincent's apartment and the bank, now with the added excuse that she needed career guidance as she prepared for college applications and adult independence. "Uncle Vincent is helping me understand what courses I should take to prepare for a business degree," she explained when our mother questioned her frequent absences after school. "He knows so much about banking and finance. He says I have the intelligence and poise to be successful in a professional career, but I need the right preparation and mentoring." The mentoring relationship Rebecca described sounded innocent enough to our parents, who were impressed by Uncle Vincent's continued interest in our education and development. But I recognized the language he was using, the same combination of flattery and guidance he had employed during our summer together to make Rebecca feel special and chosen while maintaining his position as the adult authority in her life. One afternoon in late September, I returned home from work to find Rebecca in her bedroom, crying with the intensity that reminded me of the emotional turmoil she had experienced during our weeks under Uncle Vincent's direct supervision. When I knocked on her door and asked what was wrong, she initially claimed it was just stress about schoolwork and college preparation. "It's nothing serious," she said, wiping her eyes and trying to compose herself. "I'm just overwhelmed by all the decisions I need to make about my future. Everything feels so complicated and important." But as I sat with her and gently pressed for more details, a different story emerged. Uncle Vincent had been encouraging Rebecca to consider business schools in larger cities, far from our family and the protective oversight of our parents. He had offered to help her research programs, arrange campus visits, and even provide financial assistance for application fees and travel expenses. "He says I'm too talented and ambitious to waste my potential in a small town like Millbrook," Rebecca explained, her voice carrying the same dreamy quality she had developed when discussing Uncle Vincent's opinions and advice. "He thinks I should experience life in a sophisticated environment where I can develop my full capabilities." The prospect of Rebecca moving away to attend college would normally have seemed like a natural and positive step toward adult independence. But coming from Uncle Vincent, the suggestion felt like a predatory attempt to isolate her from family, support, and increase his control over her decisions and activities. "What do Mother and Father think about these college plans?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral despite the alarm bells ringing in my head. "Uncle Vincent says we should wait to discuss it with them until we've done more research and developed a concrete plan," Rebecca replied. "He doesn't want them to worry about the expense or feel pressured to support something they might not understand. He says parents sometimes hold their children back out of fear rather than encouraging them to reach for their full potential." The pattern was becoming clear and terrifying. Uncle Vincent was systematically separating Rebecca from our families, influence and judgment, positioning himself as the only adult who truly understood her capabilities and supported her ambitions. By framing our parents as potentially limiting forces, he was encouraging her to rely on his guidance rather than their protection. That evening, I made a decision that would change the course of our family's life forever. I couldn't continue to watch Uncle Vincent manipulate Rebecca into a situation where she would be completely under his control, isolated from family support, and vulnerable to whatever he planned to do with the trust and dependence he had cultivated. After our parents had gone to bed, I approached Rebecca for what I knew would be one of the most difficult conversations of my life. I found her in the kitchen, sitting at our small table with college brochures spread around her and a notebook where she had been writing what appeared to be lists of questions and goals. "Rebecca," I said, my heart pounding so hard I was certain she could hear it. "We need to talk about Uncle Vincent." The change in her expression was immediate and defensive. "What about him? He's been nothing but kind and helpful to both of us. I don't understand why you seem to have such a problem with someone who's done so much for our family." "That's exactly what I want to talk about," I said, sitting down across from her and trying to find words that might penetrate the psychological barriers Uncle Vincent had so carefully constructed. "I don't think what happened this summer was as innocent and helpful as everyone believes." Rebecca's face flushed with anger and what looked like genuine confusion. "What are you talking about? Nothing bad happened this summer. Uncle Vincent took excellent care of us. He treated us like adults instead of children. He made us feel important and valued. How can you possibly see that as something negative? Rebecca, do you remember the night at the lake? Do you remember him coming to your room after our parents went to bed? Do you remember the photography sessions and the way he touched us when he was supposedly applying sunscreen?" For a moment, I saw a flicker of something in her eyes. Uncertainty, perhaps, or a buried recognition of the wrongness she had learned to rationalize and deny. But the moment passed quickly, replaced by the defensive loyalty that Uncle Vincent had so skillfully cultivated. "You're making everything sound dirty and wrong when it wasn't like that at all," she said, her voice rising with emotion. "Uncle Vincent cared about us. He wanted us to feel beautiful and confident. He treated us with respect and sophistication. What you're suggesting is horrible and unfair to someone who has been nothing but generous and kind." I realized that the psychological manipulation Uncle Vincent had achieved was even more complete than I had feared. Rebecca genuinely believed that her experiences with him had been positive and beneficial. She had been conditioned to interpret his abuse as love, his violations as special treatment, and his manipulation as guidance and support. "Rebecca, listen to me," I said, reaching across the table to take her hands in mine. "What Uncle Vincent did to you, to both of us, wasn't normal family behavior. Adults don't touch children the way he touched us. They don't take the kinds of photographs he took. They don't create the kinds of relationships he created with us." But even as I spoke, I could see that my words were having the opposite effect from what I intended. Instead of opening Rebecca's eyes to the truth about her experiences, I was threatening the foundation of beliefs that had allowed her to cope with what had happened to her. "You're wrong," she said, pulling her hands away and standing up from the table. "You're trying to ruin something beautiful because you're jealous that Uncle Vincent paid more attention to me than to you. You can't stand that he saw qualities in me that he didn't see in you." The accusation that I was motivated by jealousy rather than concern was so painful and wrong that it took my breath away. But I recognized the source of Rebecca's defensive response. Uncle Vincent had prepared her for this exact conversation, had warned her that other people might try to make her feel ashamed of their special relationship, and had convinced her that such attempts came from envy rather than genuine care. "I'm not jealous, Rebecca. I'm terrified. I'm terrified that Uncle Vincent is going to hurt you even more than he already has. I'm terrified that he's going to isolate you from our family and take advantage of the trust he's built with our parents. I'm terrified that you're going to end up in a situation where no one can protect you." But my words fell on ears that had been carefully conditioned to reject exactly this type of warning. Rebecca had been so thoroughly manipulated that she genuinely believed Uncle Vincent's version of reality over her own sister's desperate attempts to protect her. "I don't want to hear any more of this," she said, gathering up her college brochures and notebooks. Uncle Vincent warned me that people might try to make me feel ashamed of our friendship. He said jealous people would try to make something innocent seem dirty. I never thought my own sister would be one of those people. As she left the kitchen and went upstairs to her bedroom, I realized that my attempt to open Rebecca's eyes to the truth about Uncle Vincent had instead driven her further into his psychological trap. By challenging the beliefs he had instilled in her, I had confirmed his prediction that other people would try to interfere with their special relationship. I sat alone in our dark kitchen, surrounded by the silence of a sleeping house, and understood that I had reached a point where I could no longer protect Rebecca through indirect methods. The psychological control Uncle Vincent had achieved over her was too complete to be dismantled through sisterly conversations or gentle persuasion. If I wanted to save Rebecca from whatever Uncle Vincent was planning for her future, I would have to risk everything: our family's peace, our parents' trust, our community's respect, and possibly Rebecca's relationship with me forever. I would have to find the courage to tell the truth, even knowing that the truth might destroy everything I loved most in the world. The decision to tell our parents the truth about Uncle Vincent came to me during a sleepless night in early October, when I finally accepted that Rebecca's safety was more important than our family's peace, or my own fears about the consequences. As I lay in my bed listening to the autumn wind rattle our windows, I realized that my silence had become complicity in Uncle Vincent's ongoing manipulation of my sister. The catalyst for my final decision came the next afternoon when I returned home from work to find Rebecca packing a small suitcase with trembling hands and tears streaming down her face. She was scheduled to spend the weekend at Uncle Vincent's apartment, supposedly to work on college applications and visit a nearby campus with his guidance and supervision. "I have to go," she said when I questioned her obvious distress. "Uncle, Vincent is expecting me, and he's made special arrangements for this college visit. He says it's a crucial opportunity that could determine my entire future." But something in her voice suggested that she was dreading the weekend rather than anticipating it. For the first time since our summer under his supervision, I glimpsed the frightened girl underneath the sophisticated facade Uncle Vincent had helped her construct. "Rebecca, you don't have to go anywhere you don't want to go," I said gently, sitting on her bed and watching her fold clothes with mechanical precision. "If something about this weekend feels wrong, you can change your mind. Our parents would support whatever decision you make." "It's not that simple," she whispered, not meeting my eyes. "Uncle Vincent has invested so much time and effort in helping me plan my future. He's spent his own money on application fees and travel arrangements. I can't disappoint him after everything he's done for our family." The obligation and guilt I heard in her voice confirmed my worst fears about the psychological control Uncle Vincent had achieved. Rebecca wasn't visiting him because she wanted to, but because she felt trapped by gratitude and manipulation into continuing a relationship that was destroying her emotionally and spiritually. That evening, after Rebecca had reluctantly departed for her weekend with Uncle Vincent, I made the most difficult decision of my young life. I waited until our parents had finished dinner and settled into their usual evening routine of reading and listening to radio programs, then approached them with a request for a private family conversation. "There's something important I need to discuss with both of you," I said, my voice shaking despite my determination to finally tell the truth. "It's about Rebecca and Uncle Vincent and what really happened during the weeks you were away this summer." The change in the atmosphere was immediate and profound. Our father set down his newspaper with deliberate care, while our mother turned off the radio and gave me her complete attention. They both recognized the gravity in my voice and prepared themselves for news that would be significant and possibly disturbing. "What do you mean, Eleanor?" our father asked, his voice already carrying a note of defensive concern. "Vincent took excellent care of you girls. You've both said so repeatedly. What could possibly have happened that you're only mentioning now?" The question I had dreaded most, why I had waited so long to speak, hung in the air between us. How could I explain that victims often protect their abusers? How could I make them understand that fear and manipulation could make someone lie about their own experiences for months? Uncle Vincent didn't just take care of us, I said, forcing myself to maintain eye contact despite the shame and terror I felt. He used his position of trust to do things to Rebecca and me that were wrong. Things that no adult should ever do to children in their care. The silence that followed was so complete that I could hear the clock ticking on our mantelpiece and the distant sound of traffic on the main road. Our parents stared at me with expressions of shock, confusion, and growing horror as they began to process the implications of what I was telling them. "Eleanor, that's a very serious accusation," our mother said slowly, her voice carefully controlled, in the way she used when trying to remain calm during a crisis. "Are you certain you're not misunderstanding something? Vincent is family. He would never harm you girls." The instinct to protect Uncle Vincent, even in the face of direct accusations, demonstrated how effectively he had positioned himself as beyond suspicion. His reputation as a successful, generous, and devoted family member created a psychological barrier that made it difficult for even loving parents to immediately accept that he was capable of abuse. "I'm not misunderstanding anything," I said, my voice growing stronger as I committed fully to telling the truth, regardless of the consequences. Uncle Vincent systematically groomed Rebecca and me during those weeks. He bought us inappropriate clothing, took photographs of us in compromising positions, and gradually escalated physical contact until he was sexually abusing Rebecca while making me feel guilty and responsible for not stopping it. Our father's face had gone completely white, and he gripped the arms of his chair so tightly that his knuckles were pale. Our mother covered her mouth with her hands, her eyes wide with shock and growing understanding of why certain behaviors and changes they had observed suddenly made terrible sense. The new clothes, the sophisticated behavior, Rebecca's attachment to Vincent, our mother whispered, speaking more to herself than to us. The way she seemed so mature and different when we returned. The way she keeps defending him and visiting him. "Oh God, Eleanor, why didn't you tell us sooner?" "Because he convinced us that telling would destroy our family," I said, tears finally beginning to flow as the weight of months of silence lifted from my shoulders. "He said no one would believe us because he was a respected man, and we were just children. He said father would lose his job, that you would be ashamed of us, that the whole family would be ruined if anyone found out." Our father stood up abruptly and began pacing the length of our small living room, his hands clenched into fists and his breathing rapid and shallow. I had never seen him so angry, and for a moment I feared that his rage might be directed at me for bringing this terrible knowledge into our peaceful home. "Where is Rebecca now?" he asked, his voice tight with barely controlled fury. "She's at his apartment for the weekend," I admitted, the words feeling like a physical blow as I spoke. "Them. She thinks she's there to work on college applications, but I'm terrified about what he's actually planning to do to her." The revelation that Rebecca was currently in Uncle Vincent's care, possibly being abused at that very moment, galvanized our parents into immediate action. Our father grabbed his car keys and headed for the door, while our mother reached for the telephone to call the police. "I'm going to get Rebecca right now," our father declared, his voice carrying a determination I had never heard before. "And then I'm going to make sure Vincent never hurts another child as long as he lives." "Wait," our mother said, holding up her hand to stop him from leaving. "We need to think about this carefully. If we burst in there and Rebecca is still defending Vincent, we might make things worse for her. We need to approach this in a way that protects her dignity and gives her control over what happens next." The wisdom in our mother's words forced our father to pause and consider the psychological complexity of the situation we were facing. Rebecca wasn't just a victim who needed rescue. She was a young woman who had been manipulated into believing that her abuser cared about her. Any intervention that made her feel ashamed or powerless could cause additional trauma. "Then, what do you suggest?" our father asked, his impatience to act warring with his recognition that our mother was right. about the need for careful planning. We drive to Vincent's apartment and ask to speak with Rebecca privately, our mother said, her voice growing steadier as she developed a plan. We tell her that Eleanor has shared some concerns about Vincent's behavior, and we give her the opportunity to tell us her version of what happened. If she's not ready to admit the truth, we still bring her home and make sure she's never alone with Vincent again. The drive to Uncle Vincent's apartment above Henderson's pharmacy took only 10 minutes, but it felt like the longest journey of my life. I sat in the back seat of our family car, watching the familiar streets of Millbrook pass by, and wondering if our family would ever be the same again after this night. When we knocked on Uncle Vincent's door at 8:30 p.m., he answered with the same charming smile and confident demeanor that had always disarmed adult suspicions about his behavior. He seemed genuinely pleased to see our parents, greeting them with warm enthusiasm and inviting them inside as if their unexpected visit was a delightful surprise. "James, Catherine, what a wonderful surprise," he said, embracing our father and kissing our mother's cheek with practiced ease. "Rebecca and I were just finishing her college application essays. She's been working so hard and making tremendous progress. You should be very proud of her academic achievements." The normalcy of the scene, Rebecca sitting at Uncle Vincent's kitchen table with papers spread around her, both of them looking like ordinary people engaged in innocent academic work, made me question whether I had made a terrible mistake in forcing this confrontation. Maybe I had misunderstood what I had witnessed. Maybe my own trauma had made me see evil where none existed. But then I looked more closely at Rebecca's face and saw the strain and exhaustion that Uncle Vincent's cheerful demeanor couldn't disguise. She looked like someone who had been crying recently, and her smile when she greeted our parents seemed forced and fragile. "Rebecca, we need to talk to you privately for a few minutes," our mother said gently, her voice carrying no judgment or accusation but making it clear that this wasn't a request. "Eleanor has shared some concerns about your time here this summer, and we want to hear your perspective on what happened." The change in Uncle Vincent's expression was subtle but unmistakable. The confident charm was replaced by something harder and more calculating as he realized that his carefully constructed facade was being challenged. For the first time, I saw him as Rebecca must have seen him during their private moments, not as the generous family member he pretended to be in public, but as the predator he actually was. "Rebecca, you don't have to listen to whatever lies Eleanor has been telling," he said, his voice taking on the same intimate, persuasive quality he had used during our weeks under his supervision. "You know the truth about our relationship. You know how much I care about you and how special you are to me." But our parents' presence had shifted the power dynamic in the room, and for the first time in months, Rebecca was being offered the choice to speak freely without Uncle Vincent controlling the conversation. The psychological hold he had maintained over her began to crack as she looked between him and our parents, perhaps recognizing for the first time that she had other options besides continued submission to his manipulation. "Uncle Vincent," she said slowly, her voice barely above a whisper, "I think I want to go home now." Those 8 words, simple and quiet, but spoken with growing strength, represented the beginning of our family's long journey toward healing and justice. They marked the moment when Rebecca began to reclaim her voice and her power from someone who had used her trust and vulnerability against her. As we drove home that night with Rebecca safely between our parents in the front seat, I realized that breaking the silence had been only the first step in a process that would require tremendous courage, patience, and love from all of us. We would need to navigate police investigations, legal proceedings, and family therapy. We would need to rebuild trust, process trauma, and find ways to move forward together. But sitting in our family car with the people I loved most in the world, finally free from the terrible burden of keeping Uncle Vincent's secrets, I felt something I hadn't experienced since that first Sunday morning when our innocence was stolen from us. Hope. The road ahead would be difficult, but we would travel it together, and no one would ever again have the power to silence us through fear, manipulation, or false promises of protection. We had learned that our voices, when raised together in truth, were stronger than any predator's carefully constructed lies, and that knowledge would sustain us through whatever challenges lay ahead as we worked to transform our pain into purpose, our trauma into strength, and our silence into a voice that would protect other families from experiencing what we had endured. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.